New arrival, Seljuk. This is another Levian campaign game. Just got printed and shipped out. I'm trying to approach this a little differently, because normally with the Levian campaigns, I'd pretty much have to go through the entire rulebook every time. Now, I've read the entire rulebook to try to remind myself. Part of the, and even that may not be enough. I have to play a little bit and fuck up, right? Here, what I'm going to try to do is, first of all, I'm going to count that I probably will fuck up the first time I play. I'm going to try to play the whole campaign right through, but if I fuck up early or find out that I'm screwing things up too much, maybe I reset or whatever. I've been collecting all of these. I'm sort of totally bought into the series, but it's just hard to grasp each time because it's so different from everything else. I don't find coin, another Volko design pattern, to be as problematic to learn a new coin game, each time, even though maybe the differences between them are about as much. It's like the base ideas behind coin feel more intuitive and normal, but the base ideas of this, it's a very, very procedural game, and there's some complexity to the Levian campaign. But also, they've been coming out weirder and weirder, right? Well, this one's more of a throwback towards Nevsky, but not entirely, not as stripped down as it, but it's more of a throwback in the sense that it's going to be more about pillaging and stuff like that. Let's see. You got what you expect in a normal one. The board, it's a point-to-point type board. It's got a lot of different borders in it, and that's because there's these different thema, which are the military province is not the word I want to use. It's fine, but departments, essentially. I wanted to use the French term for some reason. I don't know why. Anyway, a lot of different military divisions which resort to another thing that's new, which is these guys, which are the thematic units, which are represented as potentially defensive forces against stuff the Seljuks can do in that particular thema. I mean, calling it department is as weird as calling it province or anything. It really is a thema. Now, this is particularly interesting to me. I wanted to catch on to this because I am just, all along, have been really thrilled with the Byzantine Empire since, I don't know, about the time I took up wargaming, maybe a little later. But for some reason, it just really entranced me. I haven't studied it all that heavily. I don't study anything all that heavily, and what I've learned, I probably forgot most of it because history just doesn't stick in my head terribly well. I don't know what does. Less and less as time goes by. I'll go over some of the basics if you've never seen a Levian campaign before, but this is not going to give you the rule. I'm not going to go over the whole rules system for a Levian campaign, although I may brush things. So you've got your lords who are these little cylinders, your commanders who are these bigger cylinders, different fortified locations, etc., locations that aren't fortified. The number next to a location is an indication of how many lords it can hold. What else? Seats, if it's got a shield next to it, that's someplace where that lord calls his home. You can muster him there and whatever. Each lord has their own little card. I haven't put everything on them yet, so let's take a look at it. If we take a look at this one, this is the wrong guy. He should have this. I'm not sure. Bomenos. This must be his. And then this one. No, this is the Skullatai. I don't know what I'm doing. Anyway. Yeah, but that's what it should be. I'm just, I'm not sure if he actually starts with these. These might have to come in through a specific card. Anyway, these are their subordinate nobles, essentially their vassals, that they're able to levy through various functionality. They have also starting units of carts and provender, etc. This is an operational game. It's actually, the series is very, very invested in supply impacts. And that's going to drive a lot of what you do throughout it. You got a couple of decks of cards, the command cards, which are going to, you're going to basically be able to program what you do in a turn by dealing out a number of leaders based on the number of cards listed here. Again, this is pretty basic this is all basic stuff to the system. So you can't move everything all at once, but you kind of can because your commander can command everybody with him. And it also allows for lieutenants, which allow you to subordinate one leader to another. And it's much more flexible in lieutenants than some of the games. A bunch of different types of troops. Spelled out in the player aids. And then a little cheat sheet for the way battles happen, a cheat sheet for all the different commands that are available, and then the sequence of play over here. Very useful. The normal pretty dice that they have, I wish they gave me twice as many with smaller size. I really don't like big dice, but I feel like they match the color of the game, so it's like, I don't want to dig them out for other things. Anything else funky? These are different types of troops, the wooden pieces. You have provenders, carts, loot, coins, all familiar stuff to use. Some event counters. These number counters are kind of used well. Usually they're used to indicate combat effects. There's a little combat table. You could also, depending on your table space setup and whatnot, you could also use these guys and face them off directly. That doesn't work so well. It's a little too tight for me. Markers. This is just a mnemonic device to remind you of how much food a particular lord's going to take. These are ravage markers, which both sides get victory points for. Ruined markers, which give a bonus to the Seljuk player for ruining enemy territory, for destroying enemy forts. On the other side, it's bypasses that if you don't want to siege a fort. Captures, only the Romans get victory points for capturing stuff. Let's see, siege marker, what's on the other side? The other side, siege. Yeah. They give you a couple of extra wooden pieces in case you lose some, and they give you an extra sheet of little stickers, and I still managed to fuck up the stickers because the instructions for setting them up are not the best. Right. Oh, and then I didn't explain the Arts of War. These are dual, these cards have dual effects. On one side they have an event, and on the bottom then they have a capability. And you draw random events, you buy capabilities, stuff like that. There's a number of different scenarios. Strangely enough, this particular piece is non-existent in any of the scenarios. I went and checked because in the grand campaign it's removed from play. There's also an initial ruins over here. Those don't get rebuilt, if I recall correctly. I'm not positive about that. I know there's a rebuilding, but it's got to do with sieges being reduced, I think. I don't think ruins ever get replaced, which means that from the beginning of this campaign, it's a destroyed location. It might as well like be printed on the map as ruins. Leads me to believe that maybe there's some intention of something from a different period, a slightly different period, not too far off from this, that might be coming out, some kind of expansion or something, at least playing around in the designer's mind. I can't see how he could do it without adding additional leaders or something, so that's a little funky. We're going to switch batteries because I got more to say before I'm not really going to dig into the rules this time. I'm going to hunt for things that are differences. Of course, to doing it that way is I don't get the advantage of reading through the rules twice in quick succession, and one of the times more or less out loud. However, I found that hasn't really helped me grasp the levy and campaign games because of the way the rules are written or whatever. It doesn't really work. I'm going to need to dig in and try playing, and if I fuck up too much, well, then we figure out what we do from there. It's one of the reasons I'm not ever sure how much I appreciate these games, because it's often very, very frustrating to get used to playing levy and campaign again. And it's been over a year, I think, since the last one I did. And you know, the way to manipulate the game has kind of fallen out of my head. There is something different here. So if you recall, I think it was the Italian one. Where that is. There's Almoravid. Inferno over there. And maybe to some extent, I don't remember if the War of the Roses one also had sort of a treachery type element where I know it had lords who changed sides, but I think it was just between scenarios, and that one was kind of disappointing because it didn't have a grand campaign. This has a grand campaign for, you know, the few years that it covers. Obviously, the Wars of the Roses are a much bigger slice of time. This just covers, what, 8 years or, no, 4 years. Whatever, 3 years. I don't know. I think 4. 68, 69, 70, 71, 4. And therefore, it has a simple calendar with all turns out on it. But it does have treachery rules. They've been simplified from what I understand. It has gardens, which is something we had in Almoravid at the very least, which allow you to acquire provender even if you're in a besieged city. You have more food, etc. there. We have unfortified settlements. Those are going to kind of annoy me because they look like, I'm not sure the difference between them and wilderness, but we'll see. You're going to have a situation with Aleppo. I'm not really sure about the historical aspects of this. This is a Fatimid Caliphate, which to me probably means that we're talking about essentially the Islamic Civil War. But they operate as a pro-Byzantine faction in this. However, if the Seljuks can take Aleppo after it declares independence, whatever that means, and I don't understand because that's going to be an event card, they win the game, basically. So that becomes a primary goal. Their other goal is pretty much point-wise. Both Baghdad and Mosul is also there, and Constantinople are off limits. They're just holding boxes for the different sides. Let me push this forward a little bit, see if I can get this. Now, as with all of these, There's a summary of changes from Nevsky, but it doesn't cover everything. In fact, there were things that I'm like looking at, in particular, one of the ways the Byzantines give victory points is by these objective markers that they're able to place through the not the levy, the call to arms action, that don't show up there and actually don't show up here in the key terms index, which kind of disturbs me because that's a big deal. Okay, so here we have different types of buildings, and then they have a size value. We faced that before. I don't remember. I guess Nevsky's are all the same size. I don't know. The holding boxes, VP markers. This doesn't feel like a change to me, except that like ravaging and ruin. I don't know. The other games were more symmetric. Here it's like only one side gets points for conquering, only one side gets points for ravaging. We have two different types of movement terrain, regular roads and then paths or whatever, or pass. The pass essentially costs 2 actions to move over. There's no winter campaign season, but there is sort of a winter interphase where you reset the year. Okay. Commanders can use coin. I don't remember what that's about. There's a lot of things that they can use coin for, and again, I've seen it in other games in the series. Okay. So, from most of the other games, I think if you had more than 4 to your size, which I think is the number of troops you have with you, it was multiples of 4 that caused issues. In this one, the first 8 are free, and then it's multiples of 4 on top of that cause you to require more food. So, like your first feeding is 8 units you're allowed to feed. I don't know how big a deal that is. The only kind of transportation is carts, okay. If you have more than 8 of any asset, you just can't. It sounds like a George Bushism. They say, there are no event cards. Okay, yeah, I guess there are cards that have no event on them. If you draw them, nothing happens. Loyalty check. The lords, and this is what I think maybe they're doing here, can use coin during a loyalty check to try to entice enemy vassals to change sides. This is a stripped-down version of what we saw in Inferno, which had a much more complicated loyalty set. Here, call to arms. Maybe that wasn't in the Nevsky. I thought it was. But I mean, it's different in every game what you can do with the call to arms, right? So, yeah. Passes slow the march. They take 2 actions to go through. You can bypass rather than besiege enemy strongholds. This is something that's come up certainly in other games of the series. Again, I don't remember Nevsky well enough to say, it's not there, so what are they talking about? But essentially what you do is when you move into an area with a stronghold, you get a bypass marker. That allows you to do more actions. Just to burn things off. But for free, you could just besiege it. So, I don't know. Otherwise, it's going to cost you another action to besiege it after you bypass. Gardens with forage. Avoid battle. Yeah! You're allowed to... I think in most of the series, avoid battle by just pulling away from the enemy. Okay? It gives you a moved thought counter, which means you have to feed, which could be a problem. But in this one, you're allowed to avoid battle into an enemy stronghold and throw yourself into a bypass. Maybe there's more room here than in most of them. I don't know. Garrisons, when they fire missiles in the combat phase, they're allowed to pick their target. They actually also have a bonus for the heavier ballistae and whatever, that they're able to hurt armored units more. You have a siege and surrender roll. I don't know, again, why this is particularly different, but basically you roll a bunch of dice and they all have to end up under the siege value. Again, I think we've seen that mechanism in other ones. Retreat. Yeah, you can join a force that's already bypassing an enemy stronghold. When you storm troops, reposition may add a lord from reserve to the front up to stronghold sides. Lord's melee for at most 6 hits each. That rule sounded very familiar. Again, it may be different from Nevsky, but it's taken, some of the other games have that. When you sack a town, it may end up ruining the stronghold and destroying it forever, and it just kind of doesn't count anymore. But it does give you points. Sallying out, army and reposition are restricted in a way similar to that in Storm. Basically, it's one lord versus one lord fighting to begin with. Supplies. Okay, so you're allowed to trace supply in a way that I remember from Inferno, and maybe some of the others I don't really recall terribly all of them. Like even the more recent, like the War of the Roses one, I don't feel like you could trace supply quite the same way. But basically, you run your carts over roads. All the carts that you have, if they can get to your seat, each or to a seat of yours, each pathway can generate one supply. So you can generate multiple supplies. But I think it has to be a leader with multiple seats, and I don't know if there are any in this one. Well, here we got this, but that's different. Those guys have that as a seat if they lose their main seat. So, inadequately besieged lords may forage. What the fuck that's up with? Ravaging. Okay, yeah. If you ravage a stronghold, you get ravage markers opposite to the printed allegiance if the locale is in friendly territory and reconquered. Yeah, this is important. So if, say, the Byzantines are trying to retake a stronghold that the Seljuks have already taken, then if they happen to ravage that territory, they get a half point for having ravaged the territory. That's a ruins. They get a half point for having ravaged enemy territory. And that's marked on the victory point thing. But if they end up capturing it, that ravage marker switches over to a Seljuk ravage marker because the populace is like, hey, we're your subjects. You treated us like shit, man. But as long as it's in enemy hands, it's worth a half point to you. But a whole full point switches over if you do that. So you don't want to, like, if you're going to win that fight, you don't necessarily want to ravage it. Taxation, the Roman commander can tax outside his own seat, but this will place ravage markers. Basically, he's essentially plundering, but it's legal and everything. It's a means of raising money, but it absolutely destroyed the local economy and caused issues. Lords with more than 8 units spend a non-linear increase in provender and feed. I thought it was 8, then 12, then 16, etc. Maybe it's something different than that. Let's take a quick peek, because I may have told you something wrong. I mean, it's not linear. 8, then 9 to 12, 13 to 16, 4 for 17 or more, yeah. But it does cap as well, which is kind of interesting. End of campaign, many new steps. Wow. Maybe we should take a look at what that says, too. Okay. End of campaign, you check if the game ends. If it's at the end of a spring campaign, you grow back ravage markers. I think that always happened. At the end of each campaign, you remove a siege marker from each area that's under siege for rebuilding the walls. Wastage. Anybody who has more than one of any given type of thing has to throw away a thing, not necessarily the thing that they have more than one of. And then a whole set of resets that involves, among other things, the Romans have to fall back to here. They have to pay to keep their thematic units on their track. The thematic units, I think, keep the troops right on them. Even if you're playing with the optional vassal, which I will, the vassal's on the calendar. There's this campaign events. You're allowed to discard Arts of War cards back in. That'll give you capabilities that you can build. Like sometimes, because the cards have double purpose, and you're able to search for capabilities and pick up the ones you want. This was always one of the tricky things, is you kind of have to know what the capabilities are, and you kind of want to know what the event is that you're throwing away by taking that capability or reducing the chance of. Next seasonal turn in the winter. Yeah. Okay, if you make the Aleppo victory check. Seljuks, who have a path of locales that are essentially not enemy strongholds, as far as I can see it. But if you're bypassing or besieging, you're able to trace through them too. Each loot that you have, you move over into Mosul, Baghdad, and then there are permanent victory points that you've gained. You exchange the loot for victory points, which is a good deal. Loot is useful for other things. I don't think you have to do this, but it's probably worth it. But then you have to check for Seljuk unity, where we have these numbers here. Count the total number of locales that have Seljuk colored runes, conquered, or ravaged markers, not victory point value. Not the victory point of the ravage, just the number of spaces on the map. Compare the yearly Seljuk unity. If the number of locales with those markers is less than calendar, Seljuk player loses victory points equal to the difference. Removing loot in the mountain Baghdad first, and then placing Roman conquered markers in Constantinople. Those will be removed when the Seljuk scores positive victory points in a bounty phase. To take them away from them. Unless allowed by capability to ignore this phase, return all lords to their seats unladen by discarding any excess seats unladen by discarding any excess assets. If the lord's seat is an enemy conquered, put them in their allied holding box. Each lord then reduces his carts to half the number rounded up. This is a normal thing. Carts break every year or whatever, or whatever. You don't have them, but you don't usually have to fall back at the end of every season. And that's a big deal. I think especially for the Byzantines having to fall all the way back to Constantinople from what the strategy seemed to indicate in the game. And that's about it there. I'm going to flip through the rules and cut in if I have anything else I want to say. About the mechanism of the loyalty check, certain events can cause a treachery card to be put in the season's campaign plan. When it's revealed, the player who revealed it chooses a lord on the treachery card. I assume they'll specify given lords. There's 3 lords available: Robert Crippen, Roussel de Belle, which the Seljuks can hit, and Arasigi for the Romans. These are guys who have pieces of both colors. When a loyalty check is triggered, the revealing player rolls a die. Before the roll, the player can choose to spend coin from their commander's lord mat and or from the lord mat of a friendly lord that's co-located with the target of the treachery. Now, the only way you could be doing that is if you're besieging him or bypassing him. Each coin spent gives a +1 modifier to the roll. Then if the lord being checked for treachery is unbesieged, the opponent has a chance to do the same, except each coin spent is a -1 to the roll. Yeah, you're not going to spend to help his treachery. The die is rolled if it's higher than fealty of the target lord, which is the die roll up there on those pieces. It's also on these up here. That lord switches sides. They're disbanded and removed from the game board, and will rejoin the game the following pay phase under the control of the opposite player. 1s and 6s are always failures and successes. Lords switching sides have both colors. Place a lord who switches sides next to the board along with his lord mat. If this cylinder was on the calendar, replace it with his cylinder of the opposite color. If his cylinder was on the map, before the next pay phase, place it on his new allegiance color at his seat with the appropriate number of conquered markers for his new side, because now you've conquered his seat through diplomacy, essentially, which might mean victory points. Or if his seat has an enemy lord present, place him in his new faction's holding box without playing conquered markers. Now, if his seat was conquered by the other player, you're not going to get additional conquered markers out of it. His lord mat should be set up with storing forces and assets and his service marker placed on the calendar as if he was just mustered. I'm guessing that means he doesn't get a chance to do a levy phase. If the lord, because normally you wouldn't when you're mustered. If a lord is switched back to his original side and he's able to be placed at his seat because there's no enemy lord there, remove the conquered markers of his previous side, otherwise place him in his new side's holding box. He remains a part of the new side even when disbanded. I don't know if they can double agent, essentially. Okay, I'll be back in a moment. Emperor is not available. This guy may be available as commander. On the thema for a moment. The thematic units, when somebody lays siege to when the Seljuks lay siege to an area, you can put thematic units in it as a garrison for it. I don't know about preventing ravage, but they can be recruited by the Roman commander into his forces. We'll take a look at the ravage, see what that says. 4.55. Yes, here's the deal. Okay, if a Seljuk, when the Seljuks want to ravage a space, they have to pay 2 commands to do it automatically. Normally it just costs 1 command to ravage. But if the Seljuk only wants to use 1 command to ravage a locale, the Roman player can choose 1 thematic themata service marker from the box in that locale's thema to defend against the ravage. Assign a hit to the themata service marker and then roll for its protection of its unit type as if it's in battle. If the roll is successful, the ravage fails and no provender or loot is taken. If it fails, though, the themata marker is killed, gone from the game, and the ravage succeeds. And you're only allowed 1 Seljuk ravage attempt per locale per command card, which means if you fail, you can't keep trying, which is a little weird. Okay. With clarification, I think some of the themata have multiple units on them. I'm not positive of this. There's an exception. There's a situation there. There's one. If either unit, if the unit put forward to defend takes the hit, the whole themata is destroyed. So it's a bad idea to use those double units for this unless you have no other option. There's automatic victory in it. If a side has no mustered lords on the map, the game ends immediately. The other side wins. Seljuk player wins if they conquer Aleppo, and Aleppo independence is in play. Otherwise, you go to the end of the campaign of whatever scenario you're in, and whoever has the most victory points wins. It has a normal set of optional rules, the hidden mats, where you can hide the presence of your forces. I'm always, first of all, I'm playing solo, so I'm not going to succeed in hiding. I often screw up anyway and don't really assess very well, so I'm not going to play with them. But even if I was playing, even if I did want to play with more Fog of War, I'm always sort of halfway opposed to them being, to the amount of Fog of War that's present. I feel like my mind gets it about right. I don't know. I am going to play with the vassal service optional rules, which means each vassal that you put on the board is tracked independently and have their own terms of service, although paying the lord pays the vassals, whatever. There's a couple of options here. Simultaneous horse combat for players who want a more unpredictable and chaotic combat. They can make all strikes of horses during battle resolve simultaneously for missiles and or melee. Guess you get your choice. This will heavily reduce the defender advantage for firing first and will also swing the balance towards the Romans. And then there's also one that gives deadly or Seljuk missiles. My feeling is I want to either use both or neither. I'm not sure that either one is historically accurate. I'm not given that argument here at all. So I'm going to go with the base rules with that. I'm going to use the vassal service optional. I like that always, even though it adds a lot of complexity to the game. Now, I want to take a look at the different troops that we have here. So, as with normal for this series, hits are generated automatically. The randomness in combat is how your protection die rolls work. So looking at these, look, we have Norman Knights, which are sort of the top level fighters. Well, wait, the Varangian Guard is even tougher. What does the asterisk mean? May attack in melee in first round only. No halving for pursuit. That's interesting. What do we have here? Better melee by capability. If Barduka -1 to target armor. I'm guessing that's one particular leader. No, this is by capability. Better armor by capability. If you have this, you get a better armor. But yeah, the Norman Knights are going to be pretty kick-ass, I'm guessing. They have heavy armor, as heavy as it comes, and it can get better. They have this 2 times melee capability. What's this? Storm. They're not particularly good at storming castles. They're just like regular infantry for that. The Turkish horse, again, capabilities give them bonuses. Turkic horse does have some special abilities. First March is -1 command cost per command card. What this means is you could play a command card. These forces are able to march 1 space for free. But only if it's only 1 leader, I think, and he has all Turkic horse. And I don't know how common that is. This guy has all Turkic horse. This guy does not. This guy does not. Although they could be reduced to that. They also have powerful bow. Only the Skull Eye have as good a bow on that side. Infantry have that kind of bow power if they have the capability with javelins. Wow, the Varangian Guard are like a one-hit wonder, but they cannot attack in melee after the first round, apparently. And then we can, and again, they're not particularly good at sieging towns, which makes sense. Militia are crap, but they can get improved. Here, so missiles by capability, they actually don't get missiles without capability. They don't get armor without capability. They don't get much armor. But yeah, they don't get a missile fire normally. And so you got to watch those asterisks. They're going to be a lot. The Varangian Guard is particularly weird to me. And then in sieges, the Byzantines or Romans have different garrisons than the Seljuks have. They're composed of different stuff, okay? And then they have their values, which is the missile fire capability, and they're able to target. These are surrender dice. That's to check whether or not things happen. This is what you gain in spoils when you conquer something, but you get no spoils, I think, for a surrender. So there's that. Anyway, I think I'm going to probably stumble through at the beginning. And again, I might have a believable beginning that I'm willing to keep with, or I might have something that just so abuses the game that I don't want to do it. Oh, there's a couple more things. Let's take a look at the levy, not levy, the call to arms, because this is always special in every game that has it. At least they had it in Nevsky too. Okay. Seljuks are able to do one call to arms option, then the Romans do so. However, events can trigger at most one call to arms per levy. There's this Marwanid Alliance Deep Raids Empress Eudokia. If you meet the criteria of these capabilities, you can execute them on the call to arms. I think these all require a card. Seljuk player can either transfer one coin from Alp Arslan's assets to this card or spend any number of coin from it. For each coin spent, make either the Amid or Mayaferican locales, marked with the Kurdish star, a seat for Seljuk lords. Lords may not tax in these locales. They can only serve as, and only one can serve as a supply source per command card, but the lord's seat markers put there. It gives a place, I guess, that you fall back to or something. I don't know. Empress Eudokia. During call to arms, the Roman player, again, he needs the card, may place the Empress token on this card or move the Empress token from this card to Constantinople to choose one of two effects, either shift a Roman Lord cylinder, one calendar box. That can be in either direction. Don't know why you'd want to, but, well, yeah, you could make it, it's a cylinder, so you'd want to make it come earlier to you. Decrease a service of a lord with a seat located at Constantinople, one calendar box, to increase the service of Diogenes, the emperor, by one box. And we've got something here. She engineered his succession, blah, blah, blah. Loot. If desired, Seljuk player can remove a loot marker from Mosul and Baghdad to shift a Seljuk lord one calendar box. It's kind of like it turns into a buck, but you're throwing a victory point away for a buck. That's a pretty bad deal, probably, unless something huge is going on. Strategic objective. If desired and if the Roman commander is in Constantinople, the Roman player may take a strategic objective marker and make it available in front of him. Alternatively, if they have already had at least one available in front of them from a previous call to arms, they may instead place one of those strategic objective markers on a mustered enemy lord mat or an enemy stronghold of the Sultanate. If you kill the lord, you get the victory point. If you capture the location, you get a victory point marker. The Roman player may never take a strategic objective from the supply and place it on a target in the same call to arms. There are only 3 of these markers in the game. They can have all 3 in front of them at one time. Once they're claimed for victory points, they'll stay in Constantinople for the rest of the game. I think that's it. I guess I'll swap batteries again because I got one charging, one's full, and load this up. Just sort of a quick overview of the differences and the things that I thought I'd point out. Yeah, a little bit about the full of the Levy campaign and Levy. Or is it Levy and campaign? Take a look at one of my others to get an idea of what the rules are in a broader basis. Although this is Byzantium, it is, less obscure to me than like maybe the Italian, the Guelph and Ghibelline conflict, and Nevsky was probably as obscure as any of these. So I don't know. I don't know. But these are just so beautiful to me because they're handling the operational warfare and that sort of chevauché concept that I really want to see. I'm still waiting for the fucking one in France. There's a 100 Years' War one. It's only going to be a slice of it a couple of years. That's all these games can handle because they're operational. They're not strategic. All right, up it goes.